Breaking news tonight, the man on trial for attempting to assassinate President Trump just found guilty. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Liz Quirantes.
And I'm Jim Grimes. After a brief deliberation, the jury delivering its verdict, convicting Ryan Routh of 5 federal counts, including attempting to assassinate a presidential candidate.
Routh was arrested last year near Trump International Golf Club in West Palm Beach, armed with a scoped rifle and a handwritten plan targeting Trump.
And to add to the courtroom drama, moments after the verdict was read, Routh tried to stab himself in the neck with a pen. Marshals rushed in, subdued him, and hauled him away from the courtroom. Well, tonight we have live team coverage and this whirlwind trial. Our Treasure Coast reporter Jack Wu will be breaking down Routh's rambling closing arguments. But
first, I-Team Chief Mike Magnoli has the dramatic final moments as this case comes to a close. Mike?
Jim and Liz, Sarah Routh, that's Ryan Routh's daughter, has been in the courtroom for all of these proceedings. And shortly after the verdict was delivered, she was crying out from the back of the courtroom, he's trying to kill himself. He's trying to kill himself. This is when he picked up a pen from the defense table and tried to stab himself in the neck. As you said, court officers had to intervene there. And from what I'm hearing, Judge Cannon had a look of shock on her face while all of this was unfolding. Very, very dramatic moments and a lot of unexpected moments over the course of this trial. But the prosecution today, during their close, laid it all out for the jury. There was so much evidence, from the rifle that they recovered at the sniper's nest on the perimeter of the golf course to the burner phones that were recovered from Routh's getaway vehicle. He was also living in that vehicle at a gas station. So those burner phones were things that he used to plot this going back months and months before September of last year. And he was attempting to flee to Mexico if he was able to pull the trigger and get away with this. So with so much physical evidence against him, it was a slam dunk case for federal prosecutors. And they also had his own words that they could use against him in that letter that he wrote, "Dear world, I'm sorry I failed." And he offered a cash reward to anyone who could finish the job to assassinate then candidate Trump. Want to go now to a graphic screen where we can show you the breakdown of the primary charge and the subsequent charges. So the main one was attempted assassination of a major presidential candidate. It was easy for the jury to find him guilty on that because of all of the evidence and testimony. The things that you see here going down, possession of a firearm and furtherance of that crime of violence, that was an easy one. And then assaulting a federal of Routh's sniper rifle. Felon in possession of a firearm or ammunition, that's because, remember here, Routh had been convicted for possessing a weapon of mass destruction a couple of years ago, and he had kind of a checkered past. So there was that felony conviction. He should have never even had those firearms. And in fact, he had to use accomplices to obtain those weapons because he knew that he wasn't going to be able to get a weapon on his own. And then the last charge there, the obliterated serial number. Yes, the jury saw that several times in photographs, and that was Government Exhibit 1 of the tangible physical evidence. They showed the jury that rifle, and there were some characters on it that he was trying to conceal. So guilty on all 5 charges here. Send it back to you in the studio.
All right, thanks, Mike. Well, let's bring in our Treasure Coast reporter Jack Wu, who was in the courtroom when that verdict was read.
He has more on the final day of trial and the jury deliberations. Jack?
Jim, Liz, Routh started off his closing argument talking about the evidence and the prosecution's argument. That was short-lived, and his courtroom antics returned in a speech meant to tell the jury that he didn't have the heart to pull the trigger that day. The final words to the jury from Ryan Routh, an emotional plea. He says the prosecution failed to prove his intent. He says the sniper's nest and rifle at the scene do not speak to what was in his heart. Routh told the judge on Monday he wouldn't testify in his own defense, but that's exactly what he used his clothes to do. And the prosecution objected to that, saying they could not cross-examine him, so they tried to shut him down. But the judge allowed him to continue. He proceeded and spoke of world conflicts, such as the war in Ukraine, the Russian occupation of Balkan states, and the massacre of Tiananmen Square. His heartfelt speech went on for 55 minutes. It did not move the jury. Now, his closing argument mostly consisted of emotional pleas and more subjective thoughts, but one fact that he did harp on was that since he didn't pull the trigger that day, it wasn't a valid attempt. This line of reasoning was thrown out in the early stages of this trial. Reporting live in Fort Pierce, I'm Jack Wu, CBS 12 News.
And as Routh was being escorted back to a federal detention facility, his daughter, who was waiting outside the gates, did this. Ruth's daughter has been in court since the trial began. We spoke to her yesterday. That interview is on CBS12.com right now.
Well, President Trump also reacting to the verdict while he was at the United Nations General Assembly. Take a listen.
It was really well handled, and it's very important. You can't let things like that happen. Nothing to do with me, but a president or even a person, you can't allow that to happen. And so justice was served, and we'll see what happens. But I very much appreciate the judge and jury and everybody on that. It was so professionally handled.
Now, over the course of this more than 2-week-long trial, prosecutors called some 38 witnesses to the stand, most of them FBI agents, weapons experts, and Routh's former employees. Jurors also, they heard from an AT&T employee who had testified in August about a month before the assassination attempt. They say that Routh came into the store, paid cash for a prepaid phone line under a fake name. That entire exchange, as you see here, was captured on surveillance. And inside Routh's messy car, investigators found several cell phones. FBI agents would testify that the phones had contained anti-Trump text messages and cell phone tower data that placed him near the West Palm Beach golf course on the day of the assassination attempt. Also, jurors watch police dash cam video. It shows detectives taking an eyewitness back to the scene to identify Routh. Take a listen.
Does that appear to be the individual that you saw running from the south side of the golf course across the street to the black Nissan Xterra?
It does look like him.
It does look like him? Does he have the same?
Prosecutors also had physical evidence, including the rifle with Routh's DNA on it. The jury's conviction indicates that the prosecution met the legal burden of proving guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. It took them roughly 2 hours to make that decision. Of course, CBS 12 News has been covering this story from the start. To see our past stories, you can head to our website at CBS12.com.